For months, Karen from the HOA mercilessly destroyed her neighbor's snowman. Until one fateful night when the tables were turned and a mysterious force enacted a chilling revenge. This is the story of how one woman's spiteful crusade against holiday cheer spiraled out of control, leading to an epic showdown with the most unexpected of consequences. Jessica gazed out the frosty window, her heart sinking as she watched Karen from next door kick the remains of her carefully crafted snowman. It was the 5th time this week. Ever since Jessica had moved into the neighborhood, Karen had made it her personal mission to destroy any sign of holiday spirit on Jessica's lawn. That's it. Jessica slammed her hand against the windowsill, trembling with rage. She stormed outside, her boots crunching in the fresh snow. "Karen, what is your problem?" she shouted, marching up to the older woman. "Why do you keep destroying my snowman?" Karen sneered, her eyes narrowed to slits. "Because it's an eyesore, dear. This is an upscale neighborhood, not some winter wonderland. Your tacky decorations bring down property values." Jessica felt her face flush with anger. "Property values? Are you kidding me? It's just a snowman." "It's against HOA regulations," Karen sniffed. "I'm simply doing my civic duty as a member of the homeowners association." "Civic duty?" Jessica scoffed. "You're just a spiteful old—" Now, let's not get carried away," Karen interrupted, raising a bony finger. "I'd hate to have to report you for verbally accosting a member of the HOA board." Jessica clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. "You know what, Karen? I'm sick of your petty power trips. This ends now." With that, Jessica turned on her heel and stormed back into her house, slamming the door behind her. She leaned against the wall, her heart pounding. There had to be a way to put a stop to Karen's relentless campaign of holiday destruction. As Jessica pondered her next move, a mischievous grin slowly spread across her face. She knew just the thing to give Karen a taste of her own medicine. The next morning, Jessica woke up before dawn and headed outside. Carefully, she constructed an elaborate snowman, complete with a top hat, scarf, and carrot nose. She stepped back, admiring her handiwork. "Let's see you try to destroy this, Karen," Jessica muttered. Sure enough, as the sun rose, Jessica watched from her window as Karen emerged from her house, her beady eyes zeroing in on the snowman. With a frustrated huff, she began to stomp towards it, her thick winter coat billowing behind her. Jessica held her breath, her fingers crossed. This was it, the moment of truth. Karen approached the snowman, her hands raised, ready to strike. But just as she was about to deliver the fatal blow, the ground beneath her feet suddenly gave way. Jessica's eyes widened in shock as Karen let out a startled yelp, disappearing into a deep hole that had mysteriously appeared in the middle of the lawn. Rushing outside, Jessica peered into the hole, her jaw dropping at the sight of Karen, covered in snow and glaring up at her with pure fury. "What is the meaning of this?" the older woman screeched. Jessica couldn't help but smile. "Just a little something I like to call holiday cheer, Karen. Enjoy your stay." With that, Jessica turned and headed back inside, leaving Karen to her unexpected predicament. The first round had gone to her, and she couldn't wait to see what the next chapter would bring. The next morning, Jessica peered out her window, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. Karen was still trapped in the hole, her shrill demands for help echoing through the crisp winter air. "This is outrageous. Someone called the authorities immediately," Karen screeched, her face flushed with rage. Jessica chuckled to herself, relishing the sweet taste of revenge. After years of enduring Karen's petty tyranny, it felt good to finally have the upper hand. Just then, a loud commotion outside caught Jessica's attention. Neighbors began to gather around the hole, some stifling laughter while others expressed concern. Jessica watched as the local police arrived, sirens blaring. "What seems to be the problem here?" one of the officers asked, approaching the gaping hole. Karen wasted no time and launching into a tirade. "That woman trapped me in this hole," she cried, pointing an accusatory finger at Jessica's house. The officer raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Ma'am, are you saying your neighbor dug a hole in the middle of her own lawn just to trap you in it?" "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying," Karen insisted. "It's a blatant violation of HOA regulations, and I demand she be held accountable." The officer let out a weary sigh. "Well, ma'am, unless we have evidence to support your claim, there's not much we can do. It appears this hole was just an unfortunate accident." Karen's face contorted with fury. "Accident? This was no accident. That woman has been tormenting me for months, and now she's trying to bury me alive." The officer exchanged a glance with his partner, clearly unimpressed by Karen's histrionics. "Look, ma'am, we're going to need you to calm down. We're here to help, but we can't do that if you keep yelling at us." Turning to the gathered crowd, the officer addressed the onlookers. "All right, folks, let's see if we can't get our neighbor here out of this predicament. Who here has a ladder we can use?" A few of the neighbors stepped forward, offering their assistance. As they worked to extract Karen from the hole, Jessica watched from her window, trying to suppress her amusement. She had to admit, seeing the mighty Karen humbled and helpless was a sight to behold. Once Karen was finally freed, she stormed over to Jessica's front door, her face twisted with fury. "This isn't over, you wretched girl," she snarled. "I'm going to make sure you pay for this little stunt." Jessica simply shrugged, unperturbed by Karen's empty threats. "Whatever you say, Karen. But just remember, you started this war." With that, she closed the door, leaving a seething Karen to stew in her defeat. Jessica knew that Karen wouldn't give up easily, but for now, she was savoring her small victory. The battle lines had been drawn, and she was more than ready to face whatever schemes Karen had in store. In the days that followed, Jessica noticed a distinct change in Karen's behavior. The older woman no longer made her daily trips to destroy Jessica's snowman, and she seemed to be avoiding any direct confrontation. Jessica couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She knew Karen was up to something, and it was only a matter of time before the other shoe dropped. Sure enough, the inevitable happened the following weekend. Jessica was just about to head out for some grocery shopping when she noticed a commotion in her driveway. To her dismay, she found her car completely covered in a thick layer of snow. And not just a light dusting, but a veritable mountain of the white stuff. "What the?" Jessica muttered, her eyes narrowing as she spotted Karen peering out from behind her living room curtains, a satisfied smirk on her face. Gritting her teeth, Jessica marched over to the neighbor's house and pounded on the door. After a few moments, Karen answered, feigning a look of innocence. "Why, Jessica, what a lovely surprise. How can I help you?" she asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Cut the act, Karen," Jessica snapped. "You know exactly what you've done. Now, are you going to help me dig my car out of this snow, or do I need to call the police?" Karen's eyes widened in mock surprise. "Police? Why, I had no idea what you're talking about. I've been inside all morning, minding my own business. Perhaps the snow just accumulated on its own." Jessica let out a frustrated growl. "Don't play dumb with me, Karen. I know this is your doing, and I'm not going to just let you get away with it." "Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, dear," Karen replied, her tone dripping with condescension. "But as a member of the HOA, I'm simply upholding the standards of our community. Your car was blocking the driveway, you see, and I was just ensuring that it was cleared." "Blocking the driveway?" Jessica exclaimed, her voice rising in disbelief. "My car was parked in my own driveway." "Ah, but you see, that's where you're mistaken," Karen said, shaking her head. "According to the HOA regulations, all vehicles must be parked in the garage or on the street. Allowing your car to sit in the driveway is a clear violation." Jessica stared at the older woman, her mind racing. She knew that fighting this battle head-on was pointless. Karen thrived on these petty power struggles, and she would never back down. "You know what, Karen?" she said, forcing a smile. "You're absolutely right. I'll be sure to move my car to the street from now on." Karen's eyebrows shot up in surprise, clearly not expecting Jessica to acquiesce so easily. "Well, I'm glad we could come to an understanding," she said, a hint of suspicion in her voice. As Jessica turned to leave, she couldn't help but feel a surge of determination. Karen might have won this round, but Jessica was far from finished. She was going to need to get a little more creative if she wanted to outmaneuver her nemesis. In the days that followed, Jessica carefully plotted her next move against Karen. She knew that frontal attacks were futile. The older woman was too stubborn and entrenched in her petty power games. No, Jessica needed to be smarter, more strategic. One afternoon, as Jessica was shoveling the snow from her driveway, an idea began to take shape in her mind. She paused, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. It was risky, but if executed properly, it just might work. That evening, Jessica put her plan into action. She waited until the dead of night, then quietly slipped outside, her fingers wrapped around a can of reflective spray paint. Carefully, she made her way to Karen's driveway, where the older woman's prized SUV was parked. With a steady hand, Jessica began coating the vehicle in a shimmering layer of the reflective paint. She worked quickly and quietly, making sure to cover every inch of the car's surface. When she was done, she stepped back, admiring her handiwork. "Let's see how you like it when your precious vehicle becomes the center of attention," Jessica murmured to herself. The next morning, as the sun rose, Jessica couldn't resist peeking out her window to catch Karen's reaction. She didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, the older woman emerged from her house, her eyes immediately fixating on the blinding, glittering SUV in her driveway. "What in the world?" Karen exclaimed, shielding her eyes as she approached the vehicle. Jessica watched in gleeful anticipation as Karen circled the car, her brow furrowed in confusion and frustration. The older woman tried to rub off the paint, but it was no use. The reflective coating clung stubbornly to the SUV's surface. Suddenly, Karen's face contorted with rage. "Jessica," she bellowed, her shrill voice carrying across the snowy landscape. Sure enough, within minutes, Karen was storming up the path to Jessica's front door, her fists clenched and her eyes blazing with fury. "Open up, you little witch," Karen shouted, pounding on the door. "I know this is your doing." Jessica hesitated for a moment, savoring the older woman's distress, before finally opening the door. She leaned against the frame, feigning innocence. "Why, Karen, whatever do you mean?" she asked, blinking up at the older woman with wide, innocent eyes. "Don't play dumb with me," Karen snarled. That monstrosity in my driveway. You did this, didn't you?" Jessica shrugged nonchalantly. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. I've been inside all morning, minding my own business." Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Don't give me that. I know it was you. Who else would do something so childish and spiteful?" "Spiteful?" Jessica echoed, feigning offense. "Why, Karen, I'm simply upholding the standards of our lovely community, just as you're always reminding me to do. And since when is a little holiday spirit considered childish?" Karen's jaw worked furiously, as if she were struggling to find the words to express her outrage. This is vandalism," she finally spat. "I'm calling the police." Jessica shrugged again, unfazed by the older woman's threats. "Be my guest, but I'm sure the authorities will see this as nothing more than a harmless prank. After all, it's not like I'm the one who's been systematically destroying my neighbor's property, now is it?" With that, Jessica closed the door, leaving a fuming Karen to stew in her defeat. She knew the older woman wouldn't give up easily, but for now, she was savoring her small victory. The battle lines had been drawn, and she was more than ready to face whatever Karen had in store next. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity in the otherwise quiet neighborhood. True to her word, Karen had indeed called the police to report the vandalism on her car, but much to her dismay, the authorities had dismissed it as a harmless prank. "Ma'am, unless there's evidence of actual damage to your vehicle, there's not much we can do," the officer had told her, his tone laced with exasperation. A little reflective paint, while certainly inconvenient, doesn't constitute a crime. Karen had stormed off, her face a mask of pure fury, muttering something about corrupt law enforcement and the downfall of society. Jessica, on the other hand, couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. She had finally found a way to get under Karen's skin without resorting to outright confrontation. But the older woman wasn't one to go down without a fight. In the days that followed, Jessica noticed a marked increase in Karen's activity around the neighborhood. The woman seemed to be on a crusade, canvassing the streets and knocking on doors, rallying the other residents to her cause. This is an outrage. Jessica overheard Karen ranting to one of her neighbors. "Our community standards are being violated, and the authorities are doing nothing to stop it." Jessica watched from her window, her brow furrowed in concern. She knew that Karen's influence within the HOA was formidable, and if the other residents were swayed by her rhetoric, it could spell trouble for Jessica. Sure enough, it wasn't long before the consequences of Karen's campaign became apparent. One afternoon, as Jessica was clearing the snow from her driveway, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb, and a well-dressed man stepped out. "Ms. Williams?" the man asked, approaching Jessica with a serious expression. "Yes, that's me," Jessica replied, her heart sinking. She had a sinking feeling she knew what this was about. "I'm with the local homeowners association," the man said, his tone clipped and formal. "We've received several complaints about your recent behavior, and I'm afraid we're going to have to issue you a formal warning." Jessica felt her stomach twist with dread. A warning? For what? "For violating HOA regulations, of course," the man replied, his eyes narrowing. "Vandalism, harassment, and general disruption of the neighborhood." Jessica's jaw dropped, and she shook her head in disbelief. "Vandalism? Harassment? I haven't done any." "This is not up for debate, Ms. Williams," the man interrupted, holding up a hand. "The decision has been made, and you have 2 weeks to rectify the situation or face further consequences." With that, the man turned on his heel and strode back to his SUV, leaving a stunned Jessica in his wake. She stood there, her hands trembling with a mix of anger and fear. It was clear that Karen had managed to rally the other residents to her side, and now Jessica was facing the very real possibility of being ousted from the neighborhood. Clenching her fists, Jessica marched back into her house, her mind racing. She couldn't let Karen win, not after everything she'd been through. But as she paced the floor, trying to come up with a plan, a sense of dread began to creep into her heart. This was a battle she couldn't afford to lose. In the days that followed, Jessica's life became a whirlwind of stress and anxiety. The HOA's formal warning had shaken her to the core, and she knew that she couldn't afford to let Karen win this battle. But as she racked her brain for a way to fight back, she found herself increasingly overwhelmed. To make matters worse, the other neighbors seemed to have rallied behind Karen's crusade. Jessica would often catch them whispering and casting disapproving glances in her direction as she went about her daily business. It was as if the entire community had turned against her, all because of one spiteful woman's vendetta. One evening, as Jessica sat alone in her living room, staring out at the freshly fallen snow, a sudden realization hit her. She had been so focused on trying to outsmart Karen that she had completely overlooked the obvious solution, appealing to the higher powers of the HOA itself. With renewed determination, Jessica sprang into action. She spent the next several days meticulously compiling a dossier of evidence, photos, video footage, and written accounts of Karen's relentless campaign of destruction against her snowman. She even reached out to some of the other neighbors, convincing a few of them to come forward and testify to Karen's behavior. Armed with her extensive case, Jessica marched down to the HOA office, her chin held high. The HOA board members listened with a mixture of surprise and skepticism as she laid out her argument, but as she presented her evidence, their expressions began to shift. "This is quite concerning," one of the board members murmured, leafing through the documents Jessica had provided. "If what you're saying is true, then Ms. Wilkins has clearly overstepped her bounds as a member of the HOA." "Overstepped?" scoffed another board member. "This goes well beyond that. Her actions border on harassment, and we simply cannot condone that kind of behavior, regardless of her position on the board." Jessica felt a surge of hope as the board members continued to deliberate. Finally, the head of the HOA turned to her, a grave expression on his face. "Ms. Williams, we've reviewed the evidence you've presented, and we're in agreement that Ms. Wilkins has indeed violated several of our community standards. As a result, we decided to suspend her from the HOA board, effective immediately." Jessica's eyes widened in disbelief. "Suspend her? Does that mean?" "It means she'll no longer have any authority to make decisions or enforce rules within our community," the board member explained. "Her previous actions against you will also be formally rescinded." Jessica felt a weight lift from her shoulders, and she couldn't help but break into a wide grin. Thank you so much," she said, shaking the board member's hand. "You have no idea how much this means to me." As she left the HOA office, Jessica couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. She had finally outmaneuvered her nemesis, and the sweet taste of victory was even sweeter than she had imagined. Now she couldn't wait to see the look on Karen's face when she realized that her reign of terror had come to an end. The news of Karen's suspension from the HOA board spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Jessica could hardly step outside her door without being stopped by curious neighbors, all eager to hear the details of her triumph over the formidable Karen from the HOA. "I can't believe it," one of the younger residents exclaimed, his eyes wide with wonder. "All this time, she's been terrorizing everyone, and now she's finally gotten what was coming to her." Jessica smiled, nodding in agreement. "It's been a long and frustrating battle, but I'm just relieved that the HOA board finally saw the light. Karen's reign of terror is over." As the days passed, Karen's once imposing presence in the neighborhood began to wane. No longer able to wield the power of the HOA, the older woman seemed to shrink into the background, her once confident stride now tinged with a hint of defeat. Jessica couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication as she watched Karen skulk around the streets, her steely gaze downcast. The tables had truly been turned, and she was savoring every moment of it. But just when Jessica thought she had finally won the war, Karen struck back with a vengeance. One particularly frigid morning, Jessica emerged from her house to find her car encased in a thick layer of ice, the windshield completely obscured. "Not again," she groaned, stomping back inside to grab a bottle of de-icer. As she worked to clear the ice, a sudden movement out of the corner of her eye caught her attention. Peering through the frosty window, Jessica spotted Karen standing in her own driveway, a triumphant smirk plastered across her face. Rage bubbled up inside Jessica, and she knew she couldn't let this latest act of sabotage go unanswered. Frantically, she began searching her house for anything that could be used as a weapon against Karen's icy assault. Her eyes landed on a can of salt, and a devious plan began to take shape in her mind. Grabbing the container, she hurried outside and began pouring the salt liberally over the ice encasing her car. As the salt began to work its magic, melting the ice, Jessica couldn't help but feel a sense of glee. "Take that, Karen," she muttered, watching as the older woman's expression shifted from smugness to confusion. But Jessica's triumph was short-lived. As she continued to work, she suddenly heard a loud cracking sound, followed by the unmistakable crunching of metal. Whirling around, she watched in horror as Karen's SUV, which had been parked just a few feet away, began to list to one side, the tires sinking into the ground. "What in the—" Karen exclaimed, rushing toward her vehicle, her face a mask of panic. Jessica's eyes widened as she realized what had happened. The salt, combined with the freezing temperatures, had caused the ground beneath Karen's car to become unstable, resulting in the SUV slowly sinking into the earth. "No, no, no," Karen wailed, her hands trembling as she tried in vain to push the vehicle back upright. Jessica stood there, momentarily stunned by the turn of events. But as she watched Karen's futile attempts to save her beloved SUV, a wicked grin spread across her face. "Looks like the tables have turned once again, Karen," she called out, her voice dripping with schadenfreude. "Enjoy your little predicament." With that, Jessica turned and headed back inside, leaving a distraught Karen to deal with the consequences of her own actions. As she settled into her armchair, sipping a hot cup of coffee, she couldn't help but feel a sense of sweet, sweet revenge. In the aftermath of the epic showdown between Jessica and Karen, the neighborhood was left in a state of stunned silence. The once formidable Karen from the HOA had been reduced to a figure of pity and scorn, as her prized SUV remained stubbornly embedded in the icy ground, a testament to the consequences of her own spiteful actions. As the news of the incident spread, Jessica found herself the reluctant center of attention. Neighbors who had previously shunned her now approached her with newfound respect and admiration, eager to hear the juicy details of her triumph over the neighborhood's tyrant. "I can't believe it," one elderly resident exclaimed, shaking her head in disbelief. "All this time, we've been too afraid to stand up to Karen, and you just waltzed in and took her down." Jessica couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. "Well, I'm just glad the HOA board finally saw the light and put a stop to her nonsense," she said, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. But even as she basked in the glow of her victory, Jessica couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for Karen. The once formidable woman had been reduced to a shadow of her former self, her pride and confidence shattered by the consequences of her own actions. As the days turned into weeks, Karen became increasingly reclusive, rarely venturing out of her home. The SUV that had once been the source of her status and power remained stubbornly rooted in the ground, a constant reminder of her downfall. Eventually, the HOA board, sensing the need for a more permanent solution, dispatched a team of specialists to retrieve the vehicle. As the hulking machine was finally extracted from the earth, Karen watched from her window, her eyes filled with a mix of resignation and defeat. In the end, Jessica couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. The battle was over, and she had emerged victorious, her snowman building prowess intact and her holiday spirit unbroken. But as she gazed out at the freshly fallen snow, she couldn't help but wonder what the future might hold. Perhaps, in time, even Karen might find a way to let go of her bitterness and embrace the simple joys of the season. After all, it was never too late to rediscover the magic of a well-crafted snowman. With a contented sigh, Jessica turned away from the window and headed back inside, ready to tackle the next challenge that life might throw her way. One thing was certain: she would never again underestimate the power of a little holiday cheer.